We're so delighted to have you here today for the Climate and Health Advocacy Boot Camp. My name is Cecilia Sorensen. I'm the director of the Global Consortium on Climate and Health Education. And this boot camp is brought to you by the Global Consortium and the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And so we come here today in crisis as well as in opportunity, really at a time when the health impacts of climate change are apparent across the globe and are happening rapidly, and we're dealing with crises pretty much everywhere, right? Often in our hometowns, and even in Florida right now, where one of our speakers is going to be calling in from. And you know, the impacts that we see in our communities, the impacts we see in our patients are really microcosms of this much larger problem. And so here we're looking at data from the IPCC, where we're seeing impacts from climate change across human systems, including impacts on water security and food production, impacts on health and well-being, and of course, as we know, impacts on cities, settlements, and our health infrastructure. I think one of the most important findings from the most recent IPCC report, though, is that climate change is really worsening health inequities. And we know that the most devastating impacts are occurring and will continue to impact places and people who are economically and socially marginalized. And so we know from our best science that we are facing incredibly strong headwinds as we try to tackle this crisis. We also know that if the global healthcare sector were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. So in addition to doing a huge amount of good in the communities we serve, there are externalities associated with the work that we do. And so not to bring you down with all this information, this is stuff you probably know really well because you're here. We are in a type of crisis. And I found this, somebody in a talk I was in the other day showed this slide, and I thought it was really interesting. When written in Chinese, the word crisis is really composed of 2 characters. The first one represents danger, and the second one, according to John F. Kennedy, represents opportunity. But actually, I've heard it more appropriately translates to choice. So we are in a place of danger, and we are in a place of choice, which is why many of you have chosen to be here today. So as health professionals, we have an incredible ability to tackle the climate crisis. We are many things, right? We are private citizens, we are institutional leaders, we are trusted community voices, we are researchers, and we are clinicians. And in each of these roles, we have the ability to act. And so through this 5-week boot camp, we are going to grow our abilities in all these different roles. And we're so delighted that you're all here to be on this journey with us. So as you know, we will be meeting every Thursday from now until October 27th at this time in this room. Our sessions are going to be, the first one today is on finding your story. Session 2 is about finding and connecting with your audience. Session 3 is about elections. Session 4 is about how you find your climate community. And session 5 is about finding your power. And we hope you can join us for all of these sessions if you're able to. Just a quick note that we have readings for each of these sessions. These are resources. These are things you can do before the session, after the session. You can download them and keep them. You can use them in your teaching. They are all available on the course website, which the link will be in the chat momentarily. We also want to let you know that we will be recording all these sessions. So if you happen to miss one, you'll be able to access the recording and catch up as you can. Quick note about Zoom logistics. This is a Zoom meeting room. So if you come off mute, we can hear you, which is great. And we'll welcome you to ask questions and to participate in some breakout rooms. But during the lectures, we ask you to just keep the microphones muted. We invite you to keep your cameras on so we can get to know each other as a community. And if you have questions for the speakers, you can put them in the chat. So without further ado, we're going to launch into our first set. No, we're not going to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Patel, who's going to welcome you on behalf of the Medical Society Consortium. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Cecilia. I'm just going to share screen really quickly. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And thank you, Cecilia, for introducing the session. So what do we do at the consortium? We organize health professionals around the country for climate action by raising awareness that climate change is profoundly an issue of health and equity. And while most Americans understand that climate change is happening, most also think it's some distant threat in the future, in a distant time, in a distant place. And it's our job as health professionals to deliver the message that climate change is here, it is now, and it is us. As health professionals, we're the most trusted messengers to do that. And so at the consortium, we convene 42 major medical societies and nurture state clinician groups around the country to mobilize on bold climate action, because we believe that solving the climate crisis is foundational to both health and to equity. And we do that by working to inform both the public and policymakers on the importance of climate and health solutions. Our membership has grown really rapidly. So in addition to 42 major medical societies, we have an additional 59 organizations that have joined us. We're in over 20 states and have about thousands of advocates at this point that are advocating for a lot of these bold policy solutions to catalyze our transition to clean, green energy. But there is still, and we've accomplished a lot, not us alone. This is in coalition with many passionate partners around the country. We've notched some real victories. We have the establishment of an Office of Climate Change and Health Equity, $60 billion in funding for environmental justice, and historic pieces of climate legislation, including the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. But we still have a big, long ways to go, particularly on the road to justice. First of all, our current policies still miss the mark in terms of meeting our priorities for the Paris Climate Accords and averting that 1.5 degrees, beyond 1.5 degrees of warming that we know is catastrophic to human health. In addition to that, there's a lot of concerns around these recent pieces of legislation and what they mean for environmental justice. And so this is to say that we need every single advocate voice to join us in this journey. And we're here to help nurture that through these 5 sessions and beyond. And with that, I'll turn it back to Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So we are really excited to open our first session today, which is going to be about finding your story. And to kick us off, we're going to hear from Dr. Gaura Basu, who is a physician and founding co-director of the CHA Center for Health Equity Education and Advocacy, and is an instructor at Harvard Medical School's Department of Global Health and Social Medicine. Dr. Basu is also a Health Equity Fellow at the Center for Climate, Health, and the Global Environment, and a faculty affiliate at the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Basu.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. It's a pleasure to join you all here. I'll keep my comments relatively brief because you have a big workshop ahead of you. But I wanted to just say a word of how I got into this work and to really, make the argument here that health professional voice is so critical to it all. I'll admit that I was not into this work with full gusto until 2018. I'd been doing human rights work and global health work and other health equity work, but truly didn't appreciate the impacts of climate change on issues of equity and justice until the IPCC report of 2018 was my wake-up moment. And so I can remember waking up and pulling my phone out and looking at the New York Times, and the top headline was a jarring message about how climate change was far worse than we appreciated, that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming could happen as soon as the year 2030. And for a credit to those scientists, because the communication of that report was enough to create a thunderbolt through my body. I remember just being paralyzed with fear and suddenly being able to see it all, to really understand the implications. I remember walking downstairs and with a broken voice, showing my wife this article. She was pregnant at the time. My 2-year-old was running around the house. And so it should be no surprise, this feeling of importance of intergenerational justice was definitely on my mind. And for a number of months, I was grieving. I was pretty depressed. I was paralyzed. I was overwhelmed. I had no idea how to begin because the issue felt so big and so daunting and so impossible. And I stayed up really late at night after my family went to bed. I would put on my little desk lamp and kind of stay up till 1 a.m. and study and try to understand what it all meant to me. And felt like, but I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a transportation or energy expert. How could I possibly contribute. I was really trying to understand what role I could play. And that began the journey of the last few years of me really realizing that in fact, health professionals, people who are taking care of people, are in fact at the heart of it. And today, a few years later, I come to you with the message that in fact, I believe that health professionals are as important, maybe the most important voice. Many studies have shown the trusted voice of health professionals is more trusted than anyone else. And that we are at the middle of this work. And the reason for that is that at its heart, the work of taking care of people's health is the work of seeing people's humanity, of translating the big structural threats that face our planet and our society and our global community, and making that real for people, making sure people understand that a pollutant and emission is not some abstract graph, but in fact, translating it into asking people to look in their mind's eye to see the child who's in the emergency room rather than in school, to be thinking about the folks in Florida today, in Pakistan, and thinking about the families who are running away from disasters, that's wrong, that's unfair, and that by putting health and health equity and social justice at the front of this conversation, we can suddenly unlock the possibilities and the pathways forward. And so I'm very grateful to see such a huge turnout today. I have learned so much from Dr. Holder and from Anita, who have been teachers and mentors of mine. The realization I've had in the last few years in meeting Cecilia and Lisa and Nicole is that there is a big community out there and that it is growing exponentially. And I'll be honest with you, I think Dr. Sorensen said it just right, that this is a moment of holding all the truths, that this is a crisis of unparalleled scope, something we have never faced before. The urgency and the ambition that we need to put this crisis at the forefront of how we create a new world is overwhelming. That is real. But at the same time, to be honest with you, I could have never believed that in 4 years, we would be sitting here with as much progress as we've made. And the state bills that are coming out and the federal bills that are coming out and the transformation that is happening around the world to make this planet sustainable, just, healthy. We have everything we need, and we need that health voice to keep pushing us and pushing us to hear Dr. King's voice that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We're all here to hold that arc together, to look at those graphs of what 1.5, 1.8, 1.2 degrees Celsius mean and pull those graphs down so that we can hold and mitigate our warming as much as possible. So thanks for having me. I know you'll have a great workshop here, and thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Basu, for your inspirational words. It's just so wonderful to have you here. And to everyone who's in the audience or in the room, please let us know who you are, where you're from. We're hoping to get to know you. This is our community. We are here together. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cheryl Holder. Dr. Holder is a fellow in the American College of Physicians and has dedicated her medical career to the care of underserved populations. As faculty and associate dean of diversity, equity, inclusivity, and community initiatives at the Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine at Florida International University, she focuses on teaching the impact of social determinants of health on health outcomes, addressing diversity in health professions, and health impacts of climate change. Dr. Holder also serves leadership roles in several other medical and climate change focused organizations. Over to you, Cheryl.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to see so many people in the audience. Always, I start off, and if you've seen my TED Talk, and every time I talk, I bring back my story, which is Anime, who way back in 2016 for me, when I met her, and as doctors know at the end, that's when the important things happens. That's not her picture, but that she reminds me so much of so many of the older African-American women that I took care of, who didn't smoke, didn't drink, they worked all their lives, they had all the complications of being weathered in poverty, but struggling through. And that one summer in July in 2016, it was hot and she was running her AC, using up her resources, using up her inhalers because her COPD was worsening. And at the end, she says, "Can you sign this for me?" because I can't pay my light bill and they're going to shut me off. And that's when I got into work as a helper, but then it started coming together for me, similar to what you heard Basal talked about when it hits that this climate thing, and I saw all the signs and I started learning more. This climate thing is now. It's now for my patients. And there was something in our planet that was happening. And it's not just for America or whatever, but it's the entire planet, that small atmosphere, we're doing something to it. And what we were doing, as I learned, was just putting up too much junk, too much CO2. And that was killing us. And it was worsening our planet and impacting us now. And then I learned all the different sources that were doing it. And I'm thinking about transportation. Miss Anna Mae never owned a car in her 64 years. Miss Anna Mae barely did any of these things in her years, like so many of my other patients, yet they were suffering. And we learned more about our vulnerable populations, our children. And I learned that, again, they are paying the price now. And we heard about what happened in Pakistan. And now in Tampa and Fort Myers and all those areas, I feel so much for the population that is getting the brunt of this, that won't have the insurance, that won't be able to bounce back. And I look again at the populations. And so the stories, you have your own stories, but so many people have been here experiencing the ravages of the pollution that has been driving this. And have we noticed and valued what was happening to our populations, we may have acted even earlier, because so many people, especially our Black and Brown people, have been living in these communities and showing us what climate is doing. And so when we look at the health impacts, and you'll learn more about the health impacts, you already know more. What the real issue that I want here is that this is the tip of the iceberg. We need more research, we need more activism, we need more awareness, and we need to understand that the folks who are impacted can give us so many of the solutions. Yes, health professionals, we are key. When you look at the overall health world, we're looking over 22 million people. If we can mobilize that force to understand our power and use that power, I love that crisis with the Chinese character, because this is a point where we have to make that choice. And we have to choose that as we look for solutions, we do center the people who are being impacted the most. And as clinicians, we know in triaging, we triage the sickest and we get those resources there and we stabilize them. That model also works in the climate crisis. And we bring that one voice together, that we have to make those changes urgently, because my animes and my children and all the folks who have impacted across the world are feeling the pain. And even better, have solutions. I bring you, this is Jorge. This really is his picture. He was my patient of several years. He's an outdoor worker. And in Miami, the heat is unbearable because the heat and humidity makes it feel so much hotter. And he worked every day. And when I talked to him about climate, he's like, I understand, but rain or shine, cold or heat, I have to work. And for much of the planet and the people, that is the world for them. But he also wanted to participate in this. He wanted us to reach out to our population and urgently find solutions for him and involve him in this, because he had things that he could say to make it better. And in his world, this is the little that he could do at the time, and it was a lot. He has passed since, but I want us to center our population, and that's why we do our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Your work is so inspiring, and we're so happy you could join us today. And please stay safe. I know you are in Florida, and I hope that everyone there fares okay. So thank you for being here. And thanks to Gaurav. You know, I really resonate with Gaurav when he said that he was staying up late at night trying to understand climate diagrams and, and saying, I'm not a climate scientist, right? And, I think, I also said to myself, I'm not an advocate. I don't know what advocacy is. I don't know about that, right? But I think that the parallel theme here is that we need to be learning new skills to address this crisis. And that's why we're here today. This is a boot camp. This is a workshop. We are going to learn new things we've never potentially practiced before. So it's exciting. And I think we're all going to come away with this as much more powerful professionals and really leverage our ability to use our health voices. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker for today, Anita Krishnan, who is a Harvard-trained narrative coach, leadership trainer, and cross-cultural consultant who works to help people better connect with themselves so they can better connect with others. She designs and facilitates human-oriented workshops on value-based leadership, storytelling, strategy, and communication, and coaches leaders from a variety of sectors in the US as well as internationally. And so we are delighted to have you here, Anita, and we are ready to learn. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Hello, everybody. Can we just do a quick, I know I can only see a few faces on here, so I do invite folks to come on video if you can. Storytelling is a lot easier when you can see people, but just to come off mute and say hello so we can hear a few of your voices as well. Just like a hello.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello there.
Hello.
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 Thank you. It's so nice. A lot of what we'll be doing today is talking about voice and storytelling. And so just to get those vocal cords warmed up, and you'll all have a chance a little bit later to share your own story. But so let me just share my screen here. Hopefully. All right. Can you all see that?
It looks good.
Great. So we can just kind of click through. So storytelling it's one of the most natural things that we do as humans, right? And so what we're going to do today, talk a little bit about why stories really matter, especially when we're trying to make change. We'll then hear a model, we're going to talk about public narrative very briefly. And so storytelling, this kind of work, there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of breadth. It really is a craft, and so it takes time. So today's session is mainly thinking about it as like planting seeds, helping you identify what you already do and build there, and then thinking about how to really deepen that as you keep moving forward. So it's just the beginning. We'll hear a live story model from Dr. Lisa Patel, and then you'll have a chance to actually practice in your breakouts a little bit. We'll come back and then close out. So stories to begin with, they're so important. And why are they so important? Let me just move here. So we keep talking about the climate and the earth, and this is one of, as we heard, it's unprecedented challenges that we're facing. We often know what to do, the solutions, right? But one of the things, and this is a very cheesy little diagram I want to show here, but we need to really focus on the heart, because we can know what to do, but until we feel that real compelling motivation to do it, it leaves us sort of stuck, right? And so one way to think about this is through this framework of the head, the hands, and the heart. We think of the head as the strategy, right? What do we need to do? How are we really thinking about it? But sometimes we don't really think about the why behind it. And so the Harvard psychologist Jerome Bruner, he says we map the world in two different ways, right? We map it with our head, understanding cognitively, and we map it with our heart. And so the language of the heart, do we have anyone in here who loves music, who loves art, who loves literature, poetry, right? Spiritual experiences, all of those are the language of emotion, the language of the heart. But what we don't always do is carry that into the work of leadership and the work of social change that we're trying to really do. But we need both in order to actually use the hands to take action. We need to know what to do. We need to know how to do it, but we really need to feel that power. And so what you're all doing here, right? Choosing to be here, it's not just for you, it's not enough for each of you to be doing it, but really getting other people involved as well, right? We can't do this work alone. And so the definition that we kind of think of for leadership is this one: to accept responsibility for enabling others to actually achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. And so the reason it's phrased like this, of accepting the responsibility, is because it's a choice, right? We talked about challenge, we talked about choice. And so choosing to be a part of a movement, choosing to actually bring people in, that's where your agency comes in personally. But then how do you actually connect with others and motivate others? And this is where the storytelling piece really matters. And so this framework I'm about to introduce, it's called public narrative. And it was developed by Marshall Ganz, who teaches at Harvard, but he really learned this through experience as his work as a community organizer. And he worked in the civil rights movement. He worked with the farm workers in California with Cesar Chavez. And what they learned, and anyone who's in community organizing knows, is that it's all about relationships. It's about relationships to build strong teams to then be able to strategize and take action. And so this framework of public narrative has three pieces. The story of self, which is about me, and why am I called to what I do, right? What experiences in my life actually shapes me to care about what I care about. The story of us is the story of the community that you're really talking to. And so being able to communicate, it's not just me. I know that we all care about this because I've seen you show these values before. And the story of now is what everybody is talking about here, is what are we facing right now? What is the urgent challenge? And how can I tell a story about it? And we saw an example earlier when Dr. Gaurav Basu was sharing, right? You can all picture him at the computer and then going into these like wormholes, trying to understand. The power of those images is very, very, it's meaningful, it's impactful, and we remember them. And so the thread that really links these three stories together is values, right? And we can talk about issues all day long, but what is it that calls you to really care about those? And that's where the emotional connection comes in. And so emotions, we're often told sort of leave them at the door, right? We have important work to do. So the emotions, that's for later, it's more personal. But the truth is the root of the word emotion in Latin, it's mote. And it means that which moves us. And so it's the same as motivation. It's the same as motor. And so emotions are actually really, really powerful. And if anyone do we have anyone indecisive in here who struggles to make decisions at all? I know I'm one, right? So when you're kind of weighing between two things, people always say, go with your gut, right? Go with your gut, follow your heart. So it's our emotions that drive our choices. So they're not just nice to have, they're actually what make us choose between different things. And our emotions reveal our value judgments, right? Why would you make this choice over another? Is because you're driven by your values. And so, of course, not all emotions are created equal. And so here on the left side, I'm sure everybody has felt these at all points in their lives, inertia, some sense of apathy, fear, isolation, self-doubt. Right. And when we talk about the climate crisis, I experience a lot of other people feeling these things, right? It's so overwhelming. Where do we even begin? Or it's just me, I'm feeling this, but those are not really, you don't want to get up and take action when you're feeling these, right? But on the other side, when we can feel, these urgency, anger, hope, solidarity, and this ICMAD means you can make a difference and not anyone, but you in particular. Right? When you feel like you're actually a part of something, it helps create a sense of motivation that calls you to action. And I want to say a word here about anger, because anger can be a really motivating emotion. And I don't mean like blind rage, but outrage, right? Of what's happening. And when you see it, and when you can pull that kind of outrage into a story, it actually really helps people feel it in themselves and can pull them in to join you. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm seeing a few nods in there, so that's good. So just really quickly before we hear this model, so storytelling is a very natural thing that we all do as humans. It's like the most human thing we can do. And I sometimes say, like, if humanity could be measured, stories would be the unit, right? It's how we connect with each other. It's how we connect with our culture, with our history. And they say caregivers spend like 80-something% of the time engaging in storytelling with young children. And that's maybe it's to keep them busy also, but it's also to teach them values, right? And it's very different than giving a list to say, do this, don't do this. We learn experientially through stories because we can actually connect with the protagonist and we can feel what they're going through. And so thinking about your own experience as storytellers, we have all these elements. And so what we're doing here isn't inventing anything or making anything new, but just making what's already implicitly in you explicit so that you can intentionally kind of craft it as you're using it. So the elements of a story, and this, Cecilia was talking about this earlier, this balance of challenge and hope, right? And if a story is all challenge and then this happened and everything went downhill and it ends there, it kind of leaves you on that left side of the emotions chart, right? Feeling like, oh my goodness, it's just everything went downhill. You need to have the balance of challenge and hope, because if everything's just great and groovy all the time, then there's no real emotional connection either. And so it's that balance that makes a story powerful. The second thing is story moments. And I think we were all probably told this, in middle school, show, don't tell. And so a story moment, it's real, it's vivid with specific details. What were people wearing? What did their skin look like? What was the smell, right? Really remembering those story details. And as you remember, if you've seen people when they're really telling you a story that means something to them, many times you can see them recreating it for themselves, which invites you in. And I've heard it said well that when we're listening to a story, it's the intersection of what's being said with what we've experienced as well. And that's what makes it feel very real. And so this isn't just storytelling for the sake of it, but it's a real way to connect with people around things that you care about so that you can start building towards meaningful change. And so the final piece is the arc of a story, right? There's a challenge that the character, the protagonist, whoever it's focused, the story, whoever it's about, what's the challenge that they face? What do they then do in the face of that challenge? And what happens, right? And we talk about a moral from a story, but these elements of challenge, choice, and outcome are what really bring it to life. And we start paying attention to people when there's a challenge, because that's when the unexpected happens, when there's uncertainty. And we're like, wait, what did they do? How did they deal with it? Because we start to learn what were their emotional resources that they pulled on. And maybe I can do that in my own life, not necessarily in the exact same challenge, but in other realms, arenas as well. And I want to say here as well, and we're going to hear from Lisa in just a minute, it's important to share challenges from your own life. When we articulate them, it actually it transforms them from things that happened to us. They become resources for us, right? Because everybody is here because things in their life have led them to make the choices that they've done, right? To care about what you care about. And so sometimes it's the challenging things, we take away the power from them and we seize that power when we tell stories. And so we're transforming not just as we tell, but we're actually transforming the experiences and the way we make meaning of them. So storytelling it's important for connection, but when the work is really hard and the work that you're all doing, it can be really draining, right? And so being able to reconnect with yourself is also really important actually to keep you going. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But before that, I want to invite Lisa is just going to share a 3-minute story, I believe. And so as you're listening to her, pay attention to, when do you feel connected? When do you feel connected to this story? What details and images bring the moments to life? And then do you really get a sense of Lisa and what she values? Okay, so I'll leave this up. So yeah, I'm going to take this down so we can see Lisa's face fully. But when do you connect? What are the details and images? And do you get a sense of what she values? So Dr. Lisa Patel, on to you.
Okay. All right. So I had the privilege of getting to write the story with Anita's help. So thank you, Anita. I want to tell you about the first time I had a panic attack. I walked into our NICU to start my day and was immediately hit with the smell of wildfire smoke. Our wildfire season and thick black blankets of smoke outside were overwhelming our filtration systems. I walked around to each of the families in the NICU that day to do what I do as a doctor: calm, reassure, and problem solve. We were able to get a few additional air filtration units in, and it was far from perfect. Those tiny lungs were breathing in foul pollution that we know is 10 times more toxic to children than regular air pollution. But I felt I could take a bad situation and make it better. For the moment, that was enough. That wasn't the day I had my panic attack. It was a year later, another terrible wildfire season, and I was sending my daughter off to school. She had done most of kindergarten on Zoom and was heading off to her first day of first grade. We got her backpack ready, packed her lunch. It was as I grabbed her favorite mask that suddenly my heart started beating so fast it felt like it was going to rip out of my chest. The AQI that day was going to be in the hazardous territory. Like my patients, the small babies, my baby was going into a smoke-choked classroom, but I couldn't problem solve this one in the moment. I couldn't keep her safe. That feeling of deep failure, I took it personally because I had been working on preparing schools for wildfire smoke for years. I had thought that my efforts for my child, and by extension, all children, would be awarded with the right protections in place so our kids could thrive. I believed my years of hard work could make a difference. I had learned that hearing my father tell his tale of growing up in a famine-stricken Indian village, the son of poor farmers. And through sheer determination and hard work, he became a successful doctor in this country, capable of supporting his 5 siblings and their families. But then I realized that day, as I held that mask in my hand, that it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. Once anxiety has been unleashed that way, it's a hard genie to put back into the bottle. But it made it clear that this problem was so much bigger than my individual effort. My anxiety came from feeling alone and feeling like the problem was bigger than I was. I had learned with time too that my father's story was bigger than him alone. He had succeeded because of his mother's sacrifices, of relatives who had looked out for him and helped him along the way. He succeeded because of a community, and now I needed to find mine. And that's what I did. Some of my work on wildfires caught the attention of a donor who gave me a small seed grant to build a policy report. I used the policy report as a reason to convene a broad coalition of stakeholders throughout California passionate about climate resilient schools. We have the ear with this broad coalition of multiple state departments and key leaders within government for the changes we're proposing, with an advocacy and funding plan to get us there. I've come to accept that I can't keep my babies safe on my own. It truly takes a village, and the villages are there waiting to be called and coalesced for the better world our kids deserve.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Okay, so I'm going to need a little participation from you all. So feel free to use the chat or to raise your hand. You can raise your blue hand or your real hand. Blue hand may be better, the Zoom hand. So when did you feel connected? And I saw a couple people putting things in the chat already. But what specific moments did you feel connected to this story? The smell, when she described the smoke in the NICU. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot about this, that smell of smoke, right? And you picture it, you can smell it, really takes you in there. We see the moment the storytelling started, right? A feeling of powerlessness. So, yeah, I wanted to ask, the next question was going to be what emotions came up for you, right? And so we could feel that with that sense of powerlessness. And the reflection on her father. So did you get a sense of Lisa and what she cares about? So anyway, can we hear any voices out loud? Does anyone feel like braving? I'm seeing a lot in the chat, which is wonderful. Yeah, Rhonda.
Yeah, for me, really great opening, definitely connected right away. But the moment I teared up was when you're putting that mask on and sending your baby out. As a mother, I'm thinking of kids with climate change. So for me, it's, not being able to protect them like we want to as parents. So I felt that deeply, obviously. Thank you, Lisa.
And thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that. And it's such a good point, right? Because it's so different than saying climate change affects our children. We love our children, right? That's true. It's a fact. But imagining putting the mask on, sending your daughter to school, it brings up the emotional connection. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Yeah, Teresa, go ahead.
So it's interesting. The story didn't go the way I thought it was. When she said, I want to tell you about the first time I had a panic attack, I thought it was in a group of people you've never met before. And we are making behavioral health and mental health, like trying to get people to think it's more normal. It's just really interesting. Like I definitely never before in my life if I had a panic attack, but with COVID and everything that was happening. So I connected immediately when you started talking about having a panic attack and didn't really think about where the story was going for a little bit after that.
Yeah. And that's, I think, thank you, Teresa. It's what we're saying about what you're hearing and what you've experienced, right? And it makes it real for you. So you become it becomes something you experience, don't just listen to as an observer in a way. Celia, go ahead.
Hi, I think similar to Teresa, I pulled in right away to the panic attack feeling. But as she began to say the story, I began to see her vulnerability as a provider, providing care for children, and her own need to ensure that her child was getting the support she needed. And so there's so many children in the Virgin Islands after Irma Maria and the Coaching Task Force that they feel that every day. So they're providing support for children, but they themselves as practitioner providers, sometimes a challenge when they don't see that their own child is getting what they need. So I right away pulled me in right away. Thank you for
sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you, Lisa, for the model. And a couple of things that I'm seeing in the chat as well that I want to capitalize on or lift up is these two last comments of, I could feel her certainty to succeed, right? And the initial feeling of impotence turned into a mission, right? So remember, we talked about that arc of challenge, choice, and outcome. So we get a sense of the challenges that she was talking about, right? But then we also get a sense of Lisa's resolve and where that comes from, rather than just saying like, I really care about this. She's helping us understand why she really cares about it. And then talking about her father, right? And learning to see that. And it took a village. Would you maybe want to be a part of her village? Maybe, right? And so this is kind of what we're trying to do here. And so let me just share a little bit again, and then we're going to have a chance for you all to get into it. So of these, going back to this self us now, right? The story, my story, the story of the community, and the story of the urgent challenge. Which one, when we talk about the climate, well, yeah, which ones do you think that people share most? Stories of self, stories of us, or stories of now? Is it mostly about the challenges that we face? Is it mostly about the communities that are working together? Or is it mostly about the people who are speaking? The challenges, yeah, right? Some story of now, a lot of story of now. Which one do you think we feel we share the least? And not only with climate, but even as medical professionals, right? Yes, I'm seeing a lot of self. And this unanimously story of self. Very good. That is the correct answer. Most people kind of struggle to share stories of self. And this isn't just talking about myself, but it's really talking about what shaped me. What are the choices? What are the challenges I've been through? What leads me to care about what I care about? And medical professionals and journalists are actually, we found to be it's the hardest for them to talk about themselves, because you're trained to actually turn the lens on others. And so here, what we're trying to do, and we're going to have a chance to do, oops, not that one, is to think for a few moments about your own life and your own story. And what drives you in the work that you do? What are the values that call you to be here in this boot camp, that call you to the work that you're doing? What is it about for you? Right? Because people go into what they're doing for many different reasons. And so thinking of your own life, what is it that keeps you in it when it's hard, right? What are those values? And then really thinking about what are a few early experiences in your life that shaped those values? When did you learn them, right? When were they challenged? And when did you what was the origin of those values? And we often think about life, if you think of a play, with Act 1 and Act 2, right? Act 2 is usually when we're grown, we're acting on our values by that point. But here we're trying to think back to Act 1 of what actually set the stage for that. And so we're pivoting away a little bit from, many times we're talking about the future, what we're going to do. But here it's really, how do we share a little bit about ourselves to help people understand us? And so I want to give you just a couple minutes to think about this, about what are some of the values that call you into the work that you do. And then we're going to have a little time to practice. And so let me just explain the breakout, and then we'll send you in just a minute. You'll be in groups of however many groups Haley puts you in, and she can let us know. But the question is this: what values call you to the work that you do? What are 1 or 2 moments in your life that you can share with your group, thinking about what we talked about, right? What was the challenge? What did you do? What happened? And why did that give you hope? What did you learn from that? So sharing just one moment, thinking back to this Act 1 piece of your life, and really just getting a chance to share with others, because people in here share values, obviously, but actually learning to articulate them where they come from for you is what the practice is about. And so a couple of the tips: share with your heart, not your head, right? So you're not trying to explain, but you're actually sharing with experiences. So again, going in with those details, the specifics. Where were you? What day was it? What was the weather like? Who was there? What happened? How did you feel in that moment? So not now looking back in retrospect with all the wisdom you've acquired through your life, but in the moment you're sharing, how did you feel? And then why did that matter so much? And so one way to kind of help yourself get into the storytelling is to just use the present tense. So instead of saying, I remember, and talking about context, just take the people into the moment with you. And just as a very quick example, I could tell you, I grew up moving around a lot, and I could say, yeah, I was made fun of for being Indian sometimes. And that's fine. That's a description. Or I could tell you, I remember sitting in the cafeteria when I was 8 years old. My mom had sent me this potato curry with cheese. And when I opened it, the smell of home filled me, but all the other 8-year-olds, I could feel their eyes on me. And then I could hear them. Ew, that's disgusting. What is that? And they saw the bright yellow color, this unfamiliar smell. And I just wanted to fit in. So I looked at it and I said, I don't know what this is. And I threw it away. And so it's a different kind of thing, right? That just telling you versus showing you. And that's the kind of thing that you are trying to do. So Haley, are the breakouts ready for folks?
Yes. Yeah, I can send everybody out. It's about 4 to 5 participants per breakout room.
Okay, perfect. So before you do that, just one quick thing. So the process of what you're going to do, if you have 4, you have a little bit more time. Just take a minute to say hello, introduce yourself. If you can come on video, please do that. And basically you're going to share like a 2-minute story. So choose somebody to keep time. You'll each share a 2-minute story, and between storytellers, just pause for a moment, thank each other. And after everybody shared their story, just reflect a little bit back. And so one way to do this is thinking about mirrors and windows. And mirrors is what are some of the moments and images and values in other stories that you heard that mirror your own, that connect with a piece from your life? And then what are some of the windows, something very different from your life that you're curious about? So you can just have a short discussion around that. So, okay, if you have any questions, feel free to, well, let me just ask actually, any questions before we go into breakouts? All right, I think we're ready. So you're gonna have 25 minutes in there. Is that correct? Yes. And off you go. Did people share some stories? How did it go how did it go? I'm seeing some thumbs, good. So I want to ask, as you heard each other's stories, as you shared your own story, what was one or two values that you heard in these stories? And just put it in the chat, but don't press enter yet. So just, what were some of the values that you really heard come up in these stories? Put it in the chat, don't press enter. And then when I count to 3, we'll all press enter at the same time. So just going to give you about 20 seconds. Okay, so everybody on the count of 3, press enter. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, there they go already. Beautiful. So this is a nice little waterfall or chatterfall. So just taking a look at what came up. Wow, that's a lot that came up. And this was not very long time. So we see community, knowledge, empathy, simplicity, resilience, solidarity, health equity, service, justice, children, care, courage, teamwork, impact, awareness, compassion, family traumas and overcoming them, self-reliance, Amazing. Similar experiences from 4 different regions of the world. I want to just highlight that because this is such an international crew of people. And to find that in a very short little exchange of stories is largely why they're so important as well. Yeah, coping, resilience, really, really good. So just this, well, yeah, how was that experience? Let's hear from a few folks. Let's hear real voices. So you can raise your real hands or your Zoom hands. Hannah.
I feel like at first it was a little startling to share a story without any preparation. I was like thinking we'd have like some time to like think about it, but I actually enjoyed kind of the on the fly story telling, and I definitely enjoyed listening to other people's stories and reflecting on it afterwards.
Yeah, why? So what we many times, it was intentional to not give you too much time to think about it because yeah, sometimes we get caught in our own head and we call it the snare of preparation of like, which story do I choose? My life is so, so full. And so there's something about just getting on it and giving it a go. So I appreciate that comment a lot. Yeah, other voices. Juan.
Do you say Juan or Juan?
Hello.
Juan.
Okay.
Yeah, Juan.
Hi, Juan.
I have a difficulty because English is my second language. Yeah? And no, it was not easy to communicate. And happily, I had a partner from Bahamas and another one from United States, from Washington, D.C., that they told me their stories. Yeah? But also difficult for me is that I work indirectly with the issues of climate change, but I am more involved with animal production. I am an animal scientist. But we have also stories about, for example, the communities, the highland communities, and how do they cope the problems of climate change. And we help them to have in better situation the health of their own animals, and also within the focus now, the One Health, no, human being and animal health, all jointly treated. No, I think that that is the experience I have had about this communication. I think that I want to improve with the communication as long as I participate in the other sessions. No, I am very happy to be with all of us, and I think I am learning a lot. And maybe you can learn a little bit of animal science, a little bit of animal health. No, that today is only One Health with humans. That is why I can say thank you.
I love that, Juan. Thank you so much. And I just want to note, it's exactly what you said. This is, like I said in the beginning, right? This is just the very, very beginning. And so if that felt hard, I hear people saying in the chat as well, like we need a proper framework. Storytelling is a craft, right? And you get better with practice. But if you keep those elements in mind of the challenge, choice, outcome, the specificity, the emotions, right? The more you tell, the more it improves over time, like anything else. But Juan, the other piece that stuck out of what you were saying this is the difference between the issues and the values, right? Because while you might be talking about animals versus humans, that care that you feel for it might actually come from a similar place. And so storytelling can be a way to bridge people who work in different fields, but share the same values. And so by being able to share not just the issue, but why you care about it, what it means to you, it's actually a really good way to create those kind of cross sector, cross country, like a lot of cross pollination, if you will. That's great. Zoe, yeah, go ahead.
Very quickly to reflect from our group, I think it was so nice to have camaraderie and to have validation. That was kind of an emotive, element of coming out. And then I also wanted to just recall what you mentioned at the beginning. is that, for me, I'm going to kind of push back and say, storytelling is easy. It is primal, right? We've been doing this since we were cave dwelling. And that's the power of social media. It's because we are so drawn to stories, and they really connect us. It's kind of another metaphor for Ubuntu, right? I am because we are. So it's part of us connecting to the collective and then also ourselves. And I'd say, in public health, we like to intellectualize things, but on the other side, it's also just very human.
Yeah. And in just driving that point home, right, that this is something, and I saw someone saying like some people are born to be natural storytellers. And I think to Zoe's point, we're all born to be natural storytellers. And it's just thinking about how do you connect with it? What connects with you tends to connect with other people as well. When you can communicate it, this is where authenticity is so important, right? Vulnerability is really important. And we hear that word a lot, and it doesn't, I think sometimes people hear vulnerable and they think of like crying, right? And they're like, I don't want to be telling a story and crying. I don't want to share. But vulnerability can take many, many different forms. And what feels vulnerable and honest to you, only you know that, right? And so I think storytelling, it's both very individual in terms of how you think about things and feel things, but then it really invites authentic connection. And I just want to look at what's happening in the chat. Yeah. Usman, did you want to share your comment out loud?
I think his mic may not be working because he was in our.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I want to saying it's a broad psychological function which reflects on the past experiences, skills, and knowledge. And so it really is a way of bringing in these resources that we have, but in an emotional way, right? Did anyone learn something about their peers in here? We just see a show of hands. Anybody learn something, hear something? Did anybody learn something about themselves? Of your own story, your own value? Seeing a few hands as well. Yeah. And I'm seeing in here, we are not alone. Let's see. I just want to, some of these comments in the chat are really good. Talea, do you want to, this feels like a particularly important comment. I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and share.
Yeah, I can. I was just sort of thinking how both of those things are true, that we are natural storytellers. We connect with people. We want to share. There's this desire to be authentic and to be close to others. And I think that makes storytelling natural, and we don't even think about it as storytelling. But I conversely believe that we're taught to not be vulnerable. We're taught to not be authentic. We're taught to market ourselves. And so there's all of this pushback from our upbringing or our professional context in particular that makes it really hard to tell a story. And I think this also sort of goes to what was being said about how emotions don't belong in science. And I think that's wrong. So I just was thinking about how both things can be true.
Yeah, it's really true. And I think part of what we're talking about, it's unlearning a lot of what we have collected over the years that actually separates us, right? And that point about like marketing or branding or trying to like position ourselves actually keeps taking us further and further away from those human elements. And so much of this is going back. It's just going, but it's not going backwards. It's actually just, if you think of like an upward spiral. So maybe it feels like you're going back, but you're actually just going up. And I think I've been doing this work for a long time, and it really, when people get down to it across so many differences, the shared experiences that people have had as they were growing up, as they got older, there's so much shared, and people always say we have more in common than we have different. But you really feel that when you hear these stories about where people really got the hope that they have, right? What keeps you in these things as things get hard. Was that somebody going to share something? Bonnie, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi there. I listened to a really wonderful podcast this morning from Anderson Cooper, who you know, he lost his brother through suicide, and he interviewed a doctor who actually was in an electrical accident and lost both his legs and one of his arms in the accident at 19 years old, and had a close relationship with his older sister, but his older sister committed suicide when she was 33, so about a decade later. And one thing this doctor said is one reason he went into medicine, and he never thought about it before, was that interface between how grief and love and life all are interfaced. And I thought about it in terms of, I don't know if we all go into medicine for that reason, but I do believe that, at least for myself, subconsciously, a lot of it was on that edge of that beautiful edge of where grief is the price of love, and to bring that to light. So just want to share that here. Maybe that's why I'm so in love with climate and protecting the climate and nature. But it's all about that, all those emotions that we live in life.
Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. It gave me goosebumps just hearing it. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about, that balance of challenge and hope, right? And how do people take the hard things that they've been through and actually transform them into things that make things better, right? And that the intersection of grief and love and healing is beautiful. Rhonda, last comment.
And I think what's really great about storytelling is those thread of really a lot of what we're about is connecting and loving others. That's what is one of the most critical things as a human being. And I think when we tell our stories, we can relate to each other. That removes politics, or removes a lot of the things that divide us, and it brings us together because we all love and care about things. And so I think that's why storytelling is so powerful.
Yeah. Love is at the heart of it all, right? Love. And we hear this in stories of people, love of protecting the ones we love, of the future, right? Of the environment, all these different pieces. And one thing I would encourage you all to think about is, how do the values that call you into medicine, how do those translate to why you care so much about the climate, right? And like, are there similarities? Are there not? Are they different? And yeah, just holding all of that. I also just want to name, we didn't talk about this earlier, but the stories that you heard in the small groups, we always say that learning can go out, but keep the stories that you heard within your group, just because they are personal stories. And so what you shared, if folks can just kind of agree to hold those as here and not letting those go out. And I think that's the end of our session today. I want to thank you all so much for being here, for participating. And I hope that you'll keep doing it, keep working on it, keep thinking back to your own stories. And somebody was saying, it's hard to pick, right? Like, what's the trigger point in a story? What are these kind of key pivot moments in our lives? And one part that we didn't talk about today that really helps with storytelling is coaching each other and asking questions, right? And that's the mirrors and windows. The reason we do that is like, here's where I connected, but here's where I'm really curious. Why this? Why did you make that choice? What happened? What was happening? So asking questions really helps others draw out their stories as well, and asking those questions of yourself. So I hope you'll keep doing it, keep digging deep, keep sharing with each other, and looking forward to having you continue on through this boot camp, which I know is just going to be amazing. So thank you all very much. And if anybody for resources or anything like that, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. But thank you all. It's been wonderful to be with you.
It's been a great experience.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody next week for the media session. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye-bye.